We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hello! Today I have Elesha MacDonald with me, and I'm so excited to introduce her to you all. She is one of my funniest friends, and I adore catching up with her. So, welcome, Elesha.
Thank you. Funniest friends, almost unusual. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll take it. I'm happy to be a friend.
I always think you have awesome stories, but not just that, like you have a knack for telling stories that always has me in stitches.
Yeah, it is a gift, I think. I do need to keep a cap on it though sometimes, so bear with me.
So we'll start with, where did you grow up?
I was really, really blessed, and I grew up in the biggest country town is Rockhampton. So it's a regional centre up in central Queensland, but it's got a very much country town feel. It's the beef capital of Australia, but it's also at one stage took out the awards for most pubs per capita, and also we had a bit of a rep as a serial killer capital of Australia at one point, second only I think to Adelaide, but it's a bit glorious. But I was really blessed to be there. It was a really nice childhood to be part of a big town.
Oh, that's awesome. I think the reputation of the most pubs per capita is hilarious.
Yeah, well, back in the day, it wasn't a particularly big town. There was only like maybe 55,000 people there, and at one point we had 27 pubs.
Oh.
So which is a lot.
Yeah.
You could literally get a drink any day, any hour, which is inspiring in and of itself.
Awesome. So what led you to the disability sector?
Oh, well, straight out of school, I actually graduated school a bit young. I was still 16 when I went off to Schoolies Week. So at that time, when we were doing our university applications and all the rest of it, I was a 15-year-old. And so I had a lot of guidance from my mother, actually, and she pretty much just looked at me and said, right, you're going to be a nurse. And it was just I can be grateful to her for that decision. Absolutely. It just suited me. So I worked my way through my degree, but before I'd even finished my degree, I began working in a federal contract for disengaged youth. So I never actually ever hit the wards. I always just worked in community and people who had different needs, lots of comorbidities, lots of, at the time I didn't recognise that I was working with people with disabilities because that's not the language we were using then.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, what we were calling troubled youth were basically kids with undiagnosed disabilities and multiple forms of multiple disabilities that were all pooling together to become what we were calling troubled youth. And shameful to be part of that. But now that I know better, I do better.
Yeah, and I think you work in what there was in the day, and the language, although we get better with language, but sometimes even in government inertia is sometimes something that is so hard to get over. And even if some people in the sector knew better, even at that time, they couldn't get the government to move beyond where they were at the time. So, I think I understand that. So did you end up finishing your nursing degree?
Yep, but I never registered, so I've never actually been a proper nurse. So I'm an academic,
Academic
at best.
nurse.
Yes. I'm not a real nurse, not a proper nurse, no.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
I know, probably, I like to live without regrets, but, if I'd had that decision again, I certainly would choose differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And so then you've at some point come to Brisbane.
Yeah, 2000 I came to Brisbane. So the company I was working for was a group training company. And, I was young and fresh and ambitious, and it occurred to me that for me to actually get a promotion in that company, it was one of the very biggest, a really big successful company in town. It was a big group training organisation, and I literally had to wait for someone to die before there was a chance of promotion. And so, so young and cocky and full of myself, I just figured I was due for better things, and also had to get a husband. So I thought, let's broaden the pond, and found myself. I got requested to come down for an interview. A bigger company had the same federal contract that we were operating up in Rocky, and I thought, this is me. So the city lights blinked and I fluttered my lashes back, and here I am. So I've 23 years, so I'm not quite local yet. I'm not a proper Brisbaneite. It's only 23 years here, so I'm trying to settle in though.
Yeah. That discourages me, having been here for now almost 6 years.
Oh no, you're a tourist still.
Yeah, I still don't know the name of every suburb or where I'm ever going when someone says, "Oh, do you go out to some place?" And I'm like, "Where?"
No, I'm absolutely a Refidex. That's an old word for the young'uns out there. Refidex for the southern side. I get lost the minute I hit the water. The minute I go across the river, I'm lost again, but I'm know my way around the south side really, really, really well. My first job, I had 26 schools to visit.
Oh, wow.
As part of the Jobs Pathway program. So I learnt my major arterial roads really fast, fast. It was really good.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what do you do now?
Support coordination. I absolutely love it. I've just fallen into my groove. I will always do this. I've got another, without letting you all know how young or old I am, I've got probably another 15 years of work, and I can't imagine I'll do anything other than support coordination or similar,
Yeah.
Who knows what the NDIS will do to us, but I love it. I'm a big cheerleader for the NDIS and a big cheerleader for people with disability, which I just love it. I love support coordination. I get to be sassy.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, well, you in fact have to be a lot of the time.
I think to be good, you've got to have that balance of sass, but also empathy and compassion, and really big ears for really big listening, and listen to the things that are unsaid as well.
Yeah. So here's a big question, and it's a bit funny to ask because, of course, sometimes I have to ask questions that I already know the answer to. But what does a support coordinator do?
Oh, well, that's a tricky question. And it's tricky because it's, I could give you the paper version, the definition, like the textbook definition. But the other thing about support coordination is it tends to be, or I tend to be, quite flexible and bespoke in my approach, because it really depends on the participant, I call them my client, what they're needing from me. So sometimes it's more of a recovery coach model where I'm looking to support people through, the ebbs and flows of their wellness. In other times, it's really about being almost a concierge where people are looking to you to just get things organised, lickety-split and efficiently. And then other times you're really there and you're able to jump straight into that capacity building and providing people with the increasing their capacity to self-advocate and self-manage. So it depends is the answer. And sometimes your client is not the obvious person. Sometimes the best way to support the participant is to support their natural supports. So, if we've got a spouse or a child in a caring role or a parent in a caring role, they are our greatest tool. They are our sharpest tool and our most efficient tool. If we break them, we are absolutely lost. So sometimes supporting our participants is about supporting their chosen people as well.
Look, absolutely. And I think you've actually done an awesome job. I love asking people this question because support coordination is so varied, and it is the way every single person does it is different, and how we do it for each client is different. Yeah. And so it constantly cracks me up, the idea of trying to say, well, in a nutshell,
it's never in a nutshell.
No. Which is why I love the question so much. So what company? Tell me a bit about your company that you work for.
Oh, I'm working at a company called My Care Collective. While we do have broad registration, we actually have made an executive decision to specialise and focus in just support coordination. So on paper, we look like we are everything to everybody, but in real life, we just do what we're really good at, which is support coordination. It just makes sense to me. I love having that independence, so I don't have affiliations with any particular care providers. I've got providers that I love working with. Yes. I've got providers that I less enjoy working with. But all in all, by being so independent and having such a broad network, it really means that I can, make really, customized recommendations to people about, what services would match their needs. And that's from the very beginning stages of plan management right through to matching up psychology, matching up OTs, matching up workers that have specialties and experiences, right down to, everything. Every single part of it is about matching those things up together.
I agree. I often say that there's two services in the NDIS that should absolutely be independent, and that's plan managers and support coordinators.
Oh, here.
And there is no way that a support coordinator should be part of a company that also provides any other service under the NDIS, because to me, that's a conflict of interest.
I think it's possible. It's fraught, though. It's fraught with risk. It's fraught with danger. It is possible. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Is the additional admin burden to do it really, really well, and to evidence that you're doing it really, really, really well.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing is to be true to yourself and, make sure, am I being unduly influenced? And so all of those things come from, I guess, it starts at a management level and trickles down. So if you're working in an organisation where management is push, and you've got KPIs and you've got budgets, and I think that would be it's a difficult position to be put in. In saying that, though, I think that because we're working in an industry that, we're all here for humans. We're here to improve outcomes and support goals for humans. Part of that, and the unpopular part of that, is that our very first step as an organisation, particularly those bigger providers that are providing daily supports, for them to be consistent and reliable and show up every day with top quality staff, they actually have to be viable, from a business perspective. So I do understand it. I don't like it, but I understand it. and I'm just so fortunate though that it's something that I don't have to choose. I don't have to choose to be part of that. But I do understand how other organisations do it. So it's not ideal. It's possible. It's messy.
Great. Look, I think you've put it really well. I always hope that other people think of this industry as, you know, and think of the people first. Sometimes I don't see that. I see people looking at numbers or looking at dollars. Not everyone is looking at dollars. Some people are purely looking at like just numbers, like, oh, we need 25, we need 50. But the ability to have support coordination separate is just so, to me, I think it is so much better.
Absolutely. And look, as a carer, like I am just like millions of other people out there in Australia, and I have a caring role for people with disabilities. And so when I'm wearing my carer's hat, I will absolutely choose independent every single time, without fail. And yeah, but it is. And I think that the fact that we are even using the word industry and business, it pretty much is. It's fraught. But then again, I also remember the days prior to NDIS.
Of course.
So I think that the use of the word industry and business and the way the NDIS has become an industry and a business is kind of just one of those, it's collateral damage basically, considering the steps forward that we've made, the changes to people's lives, their ability to reach the goals and lifestyles of their choosing. So it's not a perfect system, you know, it's a long way from a perfect system, but it is a much closer to perfect system than we were experiencing 20, 30 years ago. So will we get there? Will we get better? Yeah, I'm the bastion of hope. But are we there yet? Not yet.
Right. Look, like the NDIS is absolutely far better than block funding ever was for anyone.
Oh, it's
the shambles
it's
that
amazing.
was.
Oh, I think it goes back to our earlier chat about, you know better, do better.
Yeah.
We've just, as a community, as a society, I don't think we've ever had such a rapid change of thought, you know, on a broader community level than we are having now at the moment with disability, you know, and to open a can of worms, but, you know, transgender and gay rights and all the rest of it, that we, you know, it really wasn't very long ago that there was marches in the streets for the very most basic of human rights, and we've come so fast. I'm really proud of the society we're living in, to be honest, around that tolerance and acceptance. Have we got a long way to go? Yes. Are we doing better? Yes.
Absolutely. I was actually really excited last week when the Queensland state government changed the laws for birth certificates, and so now people can change their gender marker on their birth certificate without having to have surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just so important. And, you know, like, welcome to the 21st century, because every other state other than Western Australia have had this for a very long time. And everyone was side-eyeing Queensland going, come on. So I'm very excited.
We're a little bit country.
That.
You got to remember that. Queensland, we're just a bit country.
Yeah, I mean, there's those old jokes about when you cross the border, you wind your watch back 50 years. Yeah, I mean, when I moved here, it was like landing on the moon, and there's days when I'm still like, what is happening here? Why do we do things like this? This is nuts. It is so backwards in so many ways. And we've still got a long way to go, I think, in particular in Queensland, with GPs getting on board and understanding transgender issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having that change in the law for birth certificates will help so many people in so many different ways. And Western Australia, come on, you can do this. Let's go. Come on.
It's interesting that I've noticed a change in, in the last 4 years, just the way that the NDIS is presenting forms, particularly around gender and gender boxes and so on. I support a beautiful person who has changed their name and their gender, and, they had to notify the NDIS, and it was quite a big stressful moment because, any contact with, they've had such negative experiences with any contact with any government bodies and bureaucrats. So they had predicted, and they had been quite anxious, expecting the NDIS to be yet another hurdle, and it was beautiful. It was as simple as print it out, tick your correct box, scan it, send it in. And I was really, really, really impressed with that. It was easy as it should have been.
Yes. Well, we did discuss that a little bit on the last episode. People might have heard on episode number 5. We talked about the breaking news of the change in the NDIS, and now they've got a form. So all you have to do is fill in the form. You don't even have to call them, which is sometimes an unpleasant experience. The call centre. But maybe we won't go into that. And I like that it's a form now, and that just makes it really easy for people. So, I think they're getting better incrementally. Like you say, they're starting to know better and do better, but sort of at the same time, I'm like, seriously, come on, go faster.
Patience is a virtue, Hannah.
I have it for some things, obviously. As a support coordinator, I absolutely have to have patience,
yes,
or it wouldn't work. However, for some things, particularly like trans rights, I don't have time for people to wait.
Yeah.
My family members need trans rights now, and need to not be afraid of being murdered just for being who they are,
or just ridiculed just on a form.
Yeah,
just be able to change a form.
Right.
That's all we're asking for today.
Well, that too. Absolutely. You have a child who has a disability.
Yep.
And is he on the NDIS?
No. My son has moderate intellectual disability. No, he's at mainstream school, and he's supported, by my husband and me in our family home, and beautifully supported at school. Could not criticise the public education system at all. He has got quite complex learning disorders, so we joke at home about he's got the alphabet. He's got with all the disses, so dyslexia, dysgraphia, so school's difficult for him, but we are so blessed to have such a beautiful, beautiful human amongst us.
Yeah,
his disability is a really beautiful gift to us. He's just the coolest guy and the nicest human.
That's awesome. Yeah. And what I love too is seeing people in this sector who have lived experience of disability, whether they have a disability themselves or children or parents or whatever. Yeah. I think it is just so important to have that bit of insight. And so, like, as a support coordinator, when we do come across parents of children, we have that extra bit of, it'll all be okay.
Yeah, or parents of adult children as well, just as much. I'm working with a family at the moment, and the parents are aging. They're sort of, they're getting nervous. They're worrying about, what might happen next. And I guess it's that fear and concern is compounded for them because from their younger years and their experience of disability and what on earth would happen next, it's a very big concern for them. So, Yeah, we do need to understand. I was thinking about this actually this morning. I was doing my makeup, so maybe my creative brain gets switched on, but I thought, I bet Hannah asked me something about mental health, mental illness. And it occurred to me when I was trying to formulate it, I thought, I think that all of us, I think of mental health as on a continuum, just like our physical health. And so each and every one of us, we wake up on a morning, we're fluey, and I think if you make that analogy to mental health, that could, sit there in a line with a low mood. Then other mornings we wake up and we could literally jump mountains. And I think all of us have that continuum of mental health. And then, of course, you've got significant diagnoses on top of that sit sort of alongside that continuum. But when I'm talking to people about, recovery and mental health, it really, I think people with significant diagnoses can feel very isolated in that diagnosis, in that label. And I think it does help for people to understand that a diagnosis is not just a silo of mental health or a mental illness or mental unwellness. It's a continuum, and some highs are higher than others and some lows are way deep. But that continuum exists for everybody.
Yeah. Look, I really like that. I think that labels help to the point of a lot of research has gone into these are the sorts of things that have helped other people with this label.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is ABC. Let's try ABC, and then if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. We'll try something else. But sometimes it helps to have the label initially to go, okay, let's try ABC because we know that works for other people with that label.
That's right. It's the science behind it.
Yeah.
It's medical science. So, I've talked to people that have received a diagnosis and they've just simply don't accept that, do not acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely fine because they are not their diagnosis.
Right.
It doesn't define them at all.
And then you've got the flip side where some people are absolutely defined by their label and they walk around expecting everyone to just magically know, or they constantly talk about it as if, I couldn't possibly do this or that because I have blah diagnosis. And I'm often fascinated by that way of looking at it equally as the one saying, oh no, I don't have any label. And it fascinates me the ways people can fit in there. And then of course it's a continuum, a bit like mental health itself, because then there are some people who are like, yeah, that's my diagnosis, whatever, moving right along. And so I think it endlessly fascinates me the way people approach that, definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's what, keeps me invigorated and curious in this role is just I have this curiosity for people. I just like to know people, get to know people, share people. And without that curiosity, you can get tangled up with the diagnosis. In fact, my forms don't even have a square for what is your diagnosis. So because it's sort of, it's quite secondary to what are your challenges and what would you like assistance with.
Yeah, like I think that's really interesting. I think in some ways, like from a support coordination point of view, I absolutely understand why you would do that. And then there's the flip side of, well, when we write our end of plan report, we have to talk about diagnosis. And at that point, we do need to know exactly what are the diagnoses.
I need to know. It's just certainly not on my top 10 questions.
No, absolutely. And then sometimes one thing that does infuriate me often enough is that you'll go into that review meeting and they'll say, oh, actually, they're not on the NDIS for that diagnosis, so we're not accepting anything that talks about that. And you're like, What?
Actually,
so what did they get access for?
It's really curious that you've raised this. I've challenged a member of the NDIS just this week over exactly this. So a couple of years ago, on your NDIS plan, there was a little statement about what your diagnosis is, and that's not visible anymore on your plan. And I understand why it's not, if for some people. But for support coordination and very particularly plan management, it's really key information to know why somebody met access. And a good example is I know a gentleman who has a medical condition, so he has a chronic pain condition, but he also has a mental health diagnosis. And so in his mind, his mental health diagnosis is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. In his day-to-day life, his chronic pain condition is what matters. However, his NDIS plan does not recognise his medical condition. It recognises his psychosocial disability. And so for him to understand or build capacity around and get strong benefit from his NDIS funding, he needs to appreciate what is reasonable and necessary. And so by focusing exclusively on that chronic pain condition that is a medical concern and not part of his NDIS recognised disability, it's inappropriate for him to spend in that way. His plan manager is absolutely not party to that information because it's not included on his plan. So his plan manager is completely supportive of him spending significant amounts of his NDIS funds on services and providers that under NDIS guidelines would be, or are, not would be, definitely are, considered not to be reasonable and not to be necessary. And so, I had a bit of a strong suspicion that this gentleman, I'm not a doctor. I don't have clinical skills to diagnose. But after long discussion, I had a few good reasons to consider, does this gentleman have another diagnosis? But it took actually a 25-minute phone call back to the NDIS to determine what exactly he had met access over, and to clarify that his medical condition is not one of those things. So it took that level of conversation and that amount of time to then go back and inform the plan manager, about what had been taking place for two plans was now really not considered appropriate to continue. And you're right, if we had a little bit more transparency around that as coordinators, it would really, really help. And it really would help from the perspective also of once somebody has met access from the NDIS for one particular disability, that doesn't mean for one moment that they should not be have the right to apply to have an additional disability acknowledged or recognised and included on their access. So people are out there just trying to do their very best with the funding that they have access to, when it may not genuinely be meeting their needs on a day-to-day basis, to maintain their safety and to assist them to reach their goals. So it is important information.
Mm.
It's really important information. And not everybody has the capacity to share that openly with their coordinator. And you know what? They don't have to if they don't want to either. So there's some people don't have capacity and some people simply choose not to, both of which are completely fine. But when we're asking for consent to talk to the NDIS, that's actually one of the things that I'm asking for, to clarify that.
I love that bit at the end. I just want to pick up on getting consent to ask the NDIS something very specific.
Yep.
Because what I am very big on is, even if I have a consent form, I still want to go back to that person and go, look, I know you've given me consent to talk to Elesha, but here's exactly what I'm going to talk to her about actually. Yep. Or sometimes I like to write on consent forms, I am going to ask the physio exactly about this.
Yep.
And because I think it's really important that the client has total choice over not just that I talk to you or to their providers, but what I'm talking about.
It's really, really important. And it's to do, like consent forms are they were born from legality. It's all about rules, regulations, and legal aspects. But that's not actually what consent is. Consent's about respect, and it's about honesty, and it's about openness, and it's about trust. So I know why we have consent forms, but consent forms are distinctly different to consent. So we have to be open. I picked up a bit of I guess it's a slogan. I don't even remember where I heard it, but it's nothing about me without me.
Right.
And so if we're having those tricky conversations, and, a big part of my role is around capacity building. So supporting people to have tricky conversations, modeling how to have tricky conversations, modeling language around conversations, being confident and assertive and self-advocating. So it makes complete sense that those phone calls should be happening in the open with the participant right next to me, participating in that conversation. It just makes sense.
The other thing I try to do, if I have a client who uses email and has the ability to do that, I will CC them into every single email that I send out about them. And some providers do get upset with me because they're like, why are you including the client or their family into this email? And I'm like, well, for transparency, and so that they know what I've said, when I've said it, so that they're not calling me the next week and going, have you sent that email yet? They know exactly when I've sent that email and what I've said about them. And then hopefully what the answer is, because hopefully they press reply all and then everyone knows what the answer is. And I get quite concerned about providers who go, oh, I really don't like the way that you include the family or the client in the emails. And I'm like, well, that's too bad because that's what I do.
Yeah, I think the bigger question is not why would you, but why would you not?
Right.
I do exactly the same thing, particularly with I've got a couple of participants whose family members are their guardians. And so, literacy reasons, they get CC'd on everything. And, literally I'm sure their inbox looks like just spam from me. So we've got a bit of an agreement with, if it's just a email and you're CC'd on it, then that's it. But if I want you to do something and you need to take an action, the subject line is always to do. Or action, you need to do this. And because, people get busy, they don't have to read like strings and strings and strings of what could sometimes be back and forth. So I've got a bit of a deal going. So if you need to take action,
that idea.
If you're scanning through and you've got emails from me and it says to do, that means I need you to open it and there's something you need to do. There's a secret message for you in there. So, and it works really well because otherwise those important action items can get lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's a deal we make at the very beginning. So if I need you to do it, it will say to do.
Yeah. So. Otherwise, you can
read it at your leisure.
Yeah.
Read it at your leisure if you choose to.
Yes.
Because you don't even have to read some of the stuff I write, but you can choose to.
Yeah, yeah.
It works well.
Yeah. I want to go back to diagnoses that you make access for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something that annoys the living bejeebers out of me.
Tell me.
Yeah, why don't you tell us what you really think? What annoys me is that the original idea of the NDIS was not necessarily about diagnosis. It was about functioning.
That's right.
And the fact that it's turned completely 180 to be about diagnosis makes me eternally frustrated because you are exactly right that sometimes people think they've made access for one thing and they've actually made access to something totally different. And so their plan does not reflect what really they actually need because their daily functioning is affected by some maybe medical diagnosis, but they can't function and are disabled by that medical thing. And so it absolutely should be recognised by the NDIS. And it really pisses me off when planners say, or LAC say to me, nope, that's not reasonable and necessary because blah diagnosis does not need this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is, first of all, you don't know what their particular their particular brand of that diagnosis requires. Secondly, just it is reasonable and necessary if all of the therapists have recommended it and said it's reasonable and necessary because that their functioning requires that we have all of this.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing it doesn't take into account is the humanity of each individual. The NDIS is not means tested. So we have people accessing the NDIS, very rightly so, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, all different cultural backgrounds, all different religious and belief systems. And so that has actually quite a big impact on the way that your personal private community wraps around and supports you. The family you were born to basically can change the way you're being supported, the age of your parents, your age, the capacity of your siblings, all affects this. So you're right, by just focusing on a tick box of a diagnosis, it's failed to take into account all of those different things. And then the thing that I see particularly tragic is when those informal supports, what I like to call the humanity, when the humanity changes, when parents age, when finances are less, when the ability to pay the gap on a Medicare bill changes, and what we're left with is people's disability impacting them much more significantly. Even appropriate housing, their disability can change on a dime in that functional capacity, definitely. So I've got a few customers with, on paper, their disability is identical. So on paper, they have the exact same physical disability. They have got very, very different life experiences of that disability, though. And the differences come from the family that is around them, the stability of their home, their financial situation prior to acquiring this disability, the age at which they acquired the disability, the compounding factors, even things as simple as personality and character changes the way that a disability impacts on a functional level. So you're right. It has to be functional. We have to stop and talk and listen and provide evidence, basically. We're like little CSIs, us support coordinators. We're just about pulling evidence together to prove a point, And for someone sassy and loves a good argument, it's perfect.
That's awesome. So I'm now going to give you our final question.
Oh, thank goodness. Not that I haven't enjoyed you, but I'm keen to end it.
Oh, thank you. In your ideal world, what would the future of NDIS look like?
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that. Look, this is my unpopular opinion. I'm going to be probably cancelled for this one, but I want to see more registration. I want to see registration compulsory across more groups. I want to see less people being less vulnerable people being exposed to unscrupulous acts. I want to see more scrutiny over the finances of NDIS. NDIS is all about being sustainable. And so, unless we are putting our spotlight and our thumb down on fraud, we simply won't be sustainable. And what that means is that people who are truly, truly deserving are going to miss out. So, I want to see, I know I won't be popular, but I'm transparent. I'm ready to be looked at. I'm ready to be audited. I'm ready to be checked over. And I expect everybody else in this game should feel the same way. I've got this as a support coordinator. Every now and then I'm seeing new and creative ways of people defrauding the system, and I find it really, really offensive, because you're defrauding everybody. You're defrauding the participant who genuinely deserves it. You're defrauding the taxpayer. You're jeopardizing an entire, industry. And if the NDIS crumbles, where will we be? It has to be sustainable. I don't want to see people missing out just because someone has taken more than they've earned, basically. Not more than they deserve, but more than they've earned as a provider. So, I want to see more regulation.
Interesting.
I know it's not popular. I know that.
I think it's a hot button issue, and I do think it's a hot button issue. I get very concerned with registration in the sense that often people look at registration equals quality, and it just doesn't.
No, absolutely doesn't.
There are so many terrible registered providers out there. And so I don't feel like more registration fixes the problem.
No, I think more scrutiny.
Yeah,
people need to be on notice that you're being watched, Absolutely.
The other problem with registration as it currently is, and I do understand that what you're sort of thinking is something slightly different.
Yeah.
But as it currently is, it's really just a bunch of paperwork. Do you have your paperwork?
Yeah.
And is it all in order? And if you can show that you can be registered, and it's not hard, you can just pay for all of that paperwork from a company.
Absolutely can.
And as long as you just have it all in this perfect order, like that's it. That's all you've got to do, essentially. And I don't like that. And I don't like that it requires, such a massive investment, because it is a lot of money to become registered.
It's a lot of money to maintain registration as well.
Absolutely. So,
in saying that, I just don't know what the alternative way to really pull in scrutiny.
The other concern I have is that when you are a registered provider and the participant is agency managed, you can just put your invoices in and nobody checks it.
That's true, yes.
Whereas if it goes to a plan manager, at least you have one person having a quick squiz. Often we know they can be wrong
with
still.
cloudy glasses on.
Yeah. But at least there's a person there having a quick squiz and going, hang on a second. I just think that we need to be, everybody, registered or unregistered, should be open to audit and scrutiny. And it's not just the financial side of this either. Yeah. There's more to it, where not everybody with a disability is, weak and vulnerable and needs to be protected. That's not the sentence that you'll hear from me. But some people are vulnerable within our community, and they tend to be the people that attract the predators. Not providers, predators. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, Elesha, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you. I had no idea what to expect. Not quite as painful as I had imagined.
You should have listened to the other episodes.
Do you know how busy I am? I'll have to put it on in the car, because I listen to ABC radio in the car.
In the car. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's what
I listen because I do enjoy a bit of talk back, and all the time I spend in the car, I decided that if I heard another 80s song played on repeat again, I might jump out of the vehicle. And so I've switched over to ABC Radio and I feel a little bit smarter as a result. So I'm going to keep up with it. But your podcast might be something to put on play then.
We'll help you get smarter. That's my guarantee. No.
I need that. That would be really important.
If only it would help me.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's interesting that you say that
Absolutely.
because I think that in our industry there's lots of people feel as though they're competitors and competitors don't learn anything from each other except how to lose.
Yeah.
And we've all lost plenty. We don't need another lesson in that. But I love to collaborate and seek out mentors. And that's actually how we very first met.
Yes.
It is. I sought you out. I thought, now that's a smart cookie. So yeah, that's how we met. And to this day, I'm still seeking mentors and open to mentoring as well, you know. But definitely collaborate, not compete.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. You can email us at whatinthendispod@gmail.com. To contact me, it's hannah@tulipcoordination.com.au. And to contact Sam, it's sam@rosenbaum.consulting. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.